Thank you for tuning in to the Peoplz and Dragons. If you enjoy the content we provide, then subscribe, like, and maybe join in on the action at www.pndrpg.com. Haven City, an ugly city. Haven's strongest GOKEN, Part 2. Moments before the Haven's strongest GOKEN's meeting in the war room, we see ACTII approaching R-Type. She thanks him for the challenge he posed. R-Type looks up at ACTII, who towers over him. He asks her, how can we as evolving creatures grow without being challenged? ACTII agrees. R-Type holds out in his open palm a bead of pure energy. He explains that energy just is. It doesn't become something more until made into something more. He clenches his fist with the energy within, then opens his palm, revealing the same orb, but now with a dark blue hue to it. He asks ACTII if she would ever have gotten as mentally and physically strong as she is without adversity, loss, and struggle. ACTII recalls all the tribal trials she's gone through, all the loss in her life, including the events that led to awakening her own mutation. She shakes her head no. R-Type asks, how did she plan to have Haven forge her into a stronger person if Tempest saves her from her adversity, trials, and tribulations? ACTII understands. The Rhaelagarians knew the body, spirit, and mind as much as the Islanders did. ACTII sensed his older and mature soul through the vibrations he sends into the planet. Neville Threndord approaches the outside of the gate room along with gate scientists. He appears to already be assisting them with the center's defenses. He draws a line from the quantum frame to the oscillating blood cell rod. He tells them to install the octagram in its rightful place so it can pull from his own DNA. The scientists scratch their head and realize that this is some deep bioengineering, and they depart with his new tasks and schematics. Neville upgraded their turrets so that they can also fire and deploy Neville's indestructible force bubbles for improved defenses. Neville greets R-Type and ACTII and enters the war room with them. We cut to Tempest politely listening to Timbers Gray ramble about all of the newest flavors of Dizzy Whiz Fizz. When the others enter the room, this excuses Tempest from the conversation as he greets everyone and highlights their current objective, which is to prioritize Haven City's greatest threats. The group debates and agree that Anarchy 12 is the riskiest threat because they do not know what he's up to. With the addition of Neville's intel on all the mutations he and Anarchy implemented into androids, they now realize the danger that could be coming down the pipeline. However, Neville points at another location on the map in front of them and adds that the growing threat of the Gamma Zombies in Haven's underground has now extended to Haven's waste district, known as the Bayou. The Bayou was the part of the city where the undesirables were driven to, G-types with hideous mutations. Tempest acknowledges both current threats and admits that the crime bloat is also just as urgent. However, the largest issue is the cult. Only Tempest understands the gravity of the hidden Survey Day threat. After forming a team he can trust, and after having cycles and cycles of practice articulating it, Tempest explains to everyone the new extent of his time manipulation and how he used temporal anomalies to communicate with his past selves in order to discover that they have been reincarnated for 78 lifetimes by a cult who is farming them for their mutations. Everyone looks at each other. Neville places his hand on his newly shaved chin. Well, it kind of explains why the average G-type has a similar percentage of their DNA mutated no matter the level of radiation soaked up. Timbers Gray stands up and says it's true. Everyone turns to him. Timbers explains that there is definitely something bigger going on. He shares a very vivid vision he received from the device that he stole from the instigator's lackeys. A vision that depicted death, chaos, destruction in the entire world, and a glowing red man. He explains it as best as he can, but it just sounded incredibly movie-like and cheesy. It was hard to compare to Tempest's complex plan for a better future, but Timbers did as best as he could without them seeing it for themselves. R-Type stands up. It's a rare occasion for R-Type to be so outspoken, but his childish mannerisms are beginning to get the best of him. R-Type tells everyone that if the inhabitants of the world don't evolve naturally, they are doomed. Tempest shoots R-Type a look. It sounded familiar. What do you mean, naturally? R-Type takes a moment and shares his perspective on evolution and nature. He explains that our true resolves are forged with challenges placed on us. Tempest interrupts. This isn't Ray Lagar, Ryu. Everyone isn't a warrior. R-Type responds. We are all warriors, warring with ourselves, warring with life. ACTII agrees. As does Karma Kane. Tempest can see it in their emotions. R-Type realizes he's dividing the group, but unfortunately, the truth must be raised. R-Type continues. It's honorable to protect those who cannot protect themselves, but what qualifies as not being able to protect oneself? Tempest reasons and brings up various examples of men, women, children, and elderly caught in the crossfires of anarchy's survival jungle. R-Type doesn't want to sound harsh and immature, and so he holds his childish tongue. But Tempest knows what he wanted to say. Timbers Gray breaks the awkward silence and brings up another potential threat. A new flavor of dizzy fizz-whiz that would surely string out the masses. ACTII, who is slightly gullible and detached from Haven's culture, expresses her concern for the non-issue. Karma Kane holds in a laugh. Tempest pulls his gaze from R-Type and puts his white fedora on his head. He slides Timbers' dizzy fizz-whiz threat onto the list. Tempest turns to everyone and tells them tomorrow we will announce Haven's strongest GOKEN. Our next action will be dependent on how Anarchy reacts to the formation. Everyone agrees. ACTII looks over to R-Type, who sits complacent with his arms folded. Tempest states that there is one more thing that they must discuss before turning in for the night. What is that? Timbers Gray asks. Just as he says that, Jeremiah Oliver, CEO of Atlas Corp and partner of Gate, walks in accompanied by his 2 bodyguards. Tempest introduces Jeremiah to Haven's strongest GOKEN, and he to them. Jeremiah looks at ACTII's remarkable physique and outlandish attire. He peers over to Neville Thrindorn and Karma Kane, then finally the kid, R-Type X. He or his guards don't even see Timbers, who is circling Jerry-O and poking around in his pockets. Jerry approaches the closest agent to him and extends his hand toward Karma Kane for a shake. Suddenly, both of Jeremiah's bodyguards begin to tremble and clutch their own bodies as Tempest pulls time from Jeremiah's living space, slowing his movement astronomically, and then pours it into the hearts of his guards, sending them into a temporary state of cardiac arrest. Tempest calmly walks up and moves Jeremiah's hand away from Karma's before they could make contact, then restores time to normal, releasing his bodyguard's heart ailments. Tempest looks Jeremiah in his eyes and tells him that he has been aware of his sinister ways and identity for some time. Jeremiah's face scrunches up in confusion. Atlas Gate board members enter the room from behind him, as well as armed Gate agents, along with Judge Benedict. Tempest explains how he felt and witnessed the darkness in Jeremiah the day that they met, using his empathic sense. Using information from past cycles along with deep study of Jerry's mutation, Tempest conducted an investigation into Jeremiah's rise to fortune and power. and learned of his ways and dealings. Now with more insight and science on Jeremiah's ability, Tempest knows how it works inside and out, and so he made sure not to shake his hand this cycle time around. Jeremiah stands there speechless, gazing around the room at all the elite G-types. Tempest continues. The board of gate directors have agreed to sever ties with you and Atlas, and in return, we protect them from you. Jeremiah looks at them, calm, cool, collected, but would give anything to blow their heads off with his mechanized suit's cannons. Tempest sees the dark emotions form a smog over him. The same dark and familiar smog he always associated with Jeremiah Oliver. It was a lucrative and fruitful partnership that ends now on the 78th cycle. Tempest pulls up a photo of Jeremiah as Jace Oxen, meeting with the underground crime lords for the rest to see. He then tells Jeremiah to leave and never return. Jeremiah's face doesn't look angry, but eerily calm. We cut to the front of the gate center, formerly Atlas Gate. Haven's strongest GOKEN watch as Jeremiah departs. We see Jerry in the backseat of his armored luxury limo. His cell phone rings. He picks it up and nearly drops the phone when he is overcome with shock from who it was. We see a large truck cruising through the streets of Haven. It reaches a road currently blocked off by traffic and collapsed building debris stemming from the creeping Gamma zombie threat. The driver presses a button that lowers a window behind him, revealing the backseat depths of the royal vehicle. Sitting in the back, we see Raylagar's great warrior king, the pride of Raylagar, Rydon. The man on a path of becoming the most powerful being in the universe is general of Raylagar's army and master tactician. We see him with a large bone goblet filled with Raylagarian blood wine, watching the breaking news on Frontier District's severe irradiated zones. It was forcing them to make a detour, thus delaying them greatly. Rydon demands to know why they have stopped. The driver informs him. Rydon sips his blood wine. He then sets new coordinates that puts them through the irradiated zone. He then sends them to the driver's navigation systems. Rydon was on a conquest. After receiving word of the Dorinthian crime families moving into Haven to stake their claim, Rydon sought to station Raylagar forces into the city as well, as it has pretty much been rendered a neutral war zone that has become chaotic and ripe for the taking. Raylagar didn't respect anarchy. Its inhabitants are torn morally and the food chain is short. Rydon plans to get established before getting his hands dirty, and so he's in town for work. However, incognito. We cut to the facilitator flying through the city streets, bodiless and unperceivable, yet being relentlessly tracked by Gorgon bots scurrying all around him, making it impossible to escape their sights. Anarchy's phantom rounds have left the facilitator with a deep wound, leaving him to leak a plasma from his supernatural body. The Gorgons, after determining his nature from his blood, have adjusted and can now see him in turn, guiding the massive and terrifying napalm-spewing, impenetrable G-type hunting Wraith Chimera. The Wraith Chimera comes leaping over an entire row of homes and crash lands in front of the facilitator. Civilians already fleeing Gamma-infected Callidians now have one more creature to fear as they scatter about. The facilitator weaves his fingers together, conjuring up an illusion of the street, folding in on itself, creating a tunnel of safe passage into an alleyway. The Chimera, still with his senses glued to the facilitator's general area, break through the illusion, chasing the facilitator into an alleyway filled with a horde of Gamma-infected Callidians, ripping and shredding up a family, attempting to flee their home using a fire escape. The facilitator sees this as an opportunity to get away and uses his possession ability to push himself into the decaying husk of one of the 30 Callidians, losing himself of his predator's sight among the many. The horde of Callidians leave the remains of the family and begin to stampede away from the approaching chimera pouring out into the street, when suddenly we see Pope Turner flying through the city, giggling and enjoying himself as he points his fingers, displacing G-types, civilians, vehicles, and buildings, teleporting them to and fro to cause as much chaos as possible. Pope Turner lands on a vehicle. He spots a man and teleports the man away from his own legs and plops him in front of the facilitator's horde of running Gamma Callidians for fun. A few begin to devour the poor man as others leap over and continue to flee. Pope Turner sets his big yellow eyes on them and makes himself visible for a moment just so they can run toward him. The facilitator sees the mischievous child Pope Turner bait them all, but he too is forced to remain within the horde to blend in and stay out of the sights of the approaching Wraith Chimera. Once the horde of Gamma Callidians get close to Pope Turner, he makes a giant vat appear filled with every Callidian he captured in the Frontier District. The facilitator is practically pushed and shoved into the vat like lemmings falling off of a cliff. Once Pope Turner has them all in, he begins teleporting several Callidians at a time to random parts of Haven City that was the farthest and safest away from Frontier's infected zones, giving a new meaning to stirring the pot. Gamma Callidians crash land through the roofs of malls and department stores in Haven Square. Several appear within and on the counters of Smaven's, but luckily it was empty. Some even appear out in front of Mesa Mart just as the closing store manager activates the Atlas security system. She hangs up the phone with her boss and turns and sees several running toward her as she fumbles with the security code to get herself back into the secured store. Hundreds of Callidians appear in the sky over the gate center and begin raining upon civilians camping out in front of the gate center, awaiting the summit the following morning. Gamma Callidians begin violently attacking the Haveners, but it is not long before Nivell Threndorn's new bubble turret defenses begin to shoot bubble fields, not only protecting the innocent in giant golden lit bubble fields, but also imprisoning the zombies in a similar fashion as before, quickly and efficiently as designed. We cut to Pope Turner laughing as he distributes Gamma Callidians across Haven City without a care, when the Wrath Chimera sets its sights on Pope Turner. We quickly cut to Anarchy 12, practicing his recruitment speech when he is notified of an anomaly in his city. He looks and sees Pope Turner in his Gorgon's vision. He raises a brow at the familiar entity and calls for it to be caught. Pope Turner sets his gaze on the charging chimera that begins spewing napalm lava at him. Pope Turner activates his own bubble shield, protecting him. Once the napalm hits his shield, it is then sent through time and space and appears somewhere else in the world. Pope Turner effortlessly dissects and rearranges the beast machine, putting his head in its ass and its legs on its back, causing it to fall, crash, and become inoperable. After dismantling the beast machine, Pope Turner then teleports another batch of Gamma Callidians, this one including the facilitator, sending them somewhere else. He then stretches and yawns as he begins to get bored. He thinks about checking on the gate center to see what the zombies he sent there are doing. Pope Turner turns invisible, encompassed in his own bubble, and begins to fly over the city, when suddenly appearing within his bubble right behind him, a wanderer android plunges its katana through Pope's shoulder, impaling him. Shocked and off guard, Pope Turner places his hand on the blade and teleports it away. 3 orbs emerge from the wanderer and fire tractor beams, damn near freezing Pope in place. Before Pope Turner loses complete function of his own body, he teleports himself and everything within his bubble into the Neutros realm, the realm that exists between realms. Once in the realm, the Wanderer is exposed to time and space and begins to freeze over and malfunction. Poke then teleports the Wanderer back out of the realm, but keeps the head. Poke holds his shoulder in pain with one hand, while holding the head of the Wanderer in the other. Too close for comfort, he thinks. It really has become impossible to escape Anarchy's sight in Haven. We cut to Anarchy. He seems to be analyzing the data, receiving the coordinates and environmental readings of the Neutros dimension from the Wanderer before it went offline. Anarchy 12 uploads it to the Oracle, and the Oracle spills many new discoveries, details, and leads on the origins of the newly discovered dimension between dimensions. Anarchy smiles. We cut to the facilitator and dozens of Gamma Calidians falling from the sky and right into the street, piling on one another in front of an oncoming truck. Though this new Calidian body was infected and weakened, the facilitator's manipulation magic was still intact. The truck comes flying down the road, and the facilitator has no doubt that it will most certainly bulldoze them unless stopped. The facilitator stands to his feet and creates an illusion of a vehicular barricade. The truck comes to a screeching halt. The Gamma Calidians stand before the vehicle, their glowing eyes peering through its headlights and into the driver's seat. The back passenger seat door swings open, and stepping outside of the vehicle, we see the great Raylagarian warrior king, Rhydon, a towering body of muscle standing at 7'4". Rhydon smells the disgusting and polluted city air. It's no wonder people mutate into monsters like what he sees before him. The place was a cesspool, he thinks. The Warrior King's personal guard pull up in their truck and get out to investigate yet another sudden obstacle. The facilitator, being the only intelligent Gamma zombie, could clearly see that these were not ordinary people and doesn't leap at them on instinct as the rest of the feral Calidians do. All of them rush Rhydon with intent to devour. Rhydon tells his men to stand down as he would like to stretch a bit. He removes his cloak and walks toward the approaching horde. With effortless grace, intensity, and precision, we watch Rhydon dismantle each attacker one by one with brutal and direct power strikes, all without being touched. Like his brother, the facilitator was a genius and realizes what he discovered. Rhydon wipes Calidian guts off of his knuckles and sets his eyes on the last remaining and peculiar Calidian inhabited by the facilitator. Rhydon laughs and speaks to his men. So they can think and make decisions. They all begin to laugh. Rhydon tells his men to remove the barricade and begins to get back in the car when suddenly the facilitator begins sprinting toward Rhydon. Rhydon, surprised, awaits. The facilitator leaps forward, claws and fangs out. Rhydon buries his feet into the ground and throws one solid right hook into the chest of the facilitator-possessed Gamma Calidian, blowing him into pieces. Rhydon smiles and wipes himself clean when suddenly he is overcome with the facilitator's spirit. We watch as the facilitator's body possession begins to overpower and usurp Rhydon's body, leaving him conscious of his own actions, now in complete control by the body-snatching lich. Rhydon, the facilitator king, stands there with his back turned to his people, unaware of his possession. He turns around and sets his eyes on his men. The facilitator feels the immense power and skill he now is host to. The facilitator king conjures up an illusion that makes everything in the vicinity appear to melt around them. The Raylagarian royal guards begin to stumble in the melting street below them while observing their morphing environment in confusion. The melting streets pull all of the guards into the ground, then hardens around them, suffocating them. Or at least that's how they perceived it. Each Raylagarian guard lay on the ground with their hands wrapped around their own necks, dead. The facilitator king walks over to the driver's seat and he yanks the dead driver out of the car, but not before retrieving his cell phone. He dials a secret number that taps into the special tank frequency, thus getting him in direct contact with his brother. The instigator pulls up his brother, the facilitator king, on his monitor. He knew it wouldn't be long before his brother was able to overcome and re-emerge. The instigator informs his brother that he will be returning to Haven and gives him the coordinates to where they will meet. Rhydon, the facilitator king, disconnects the call and crushes the phone in his grips. It's the next morning. We cut to the Gate Center's kitchen doors as a master chef comes bursting out of them, balancing a couple dozen plates of food piled high with breakfast. He brings them over to a table where R-Type and Ebony are scarfing down plate after plate in a test of endurance and guts. They both finish around the same time and lean back. Their HS GOKEN uniforms are immaculate from its self-cleaning technology. Tempest walks into the room accompanied by Nivell, Karma, and Timbrus, and bids everyone a good morning. It was a new dawn and time to reveal to the world Haven's strongest. Ebony jumps up in excitement. R-Type takes one last bite and pulls his scarf back around his face. We cut to Tempest, Kid R-Type, Ebony, Karma Kane, Nivell, and Timbrus walking out of the Gate Center in their pure white uniforms in slow motion. The city cheers and flashes pictures as they approach the platform. Tempest and his team stand before the city as he gives a heartfelt speech explaining the symbolism and purpose of Haven's strongest GOKEN. When suddenly, Anarchy's peacekeeper androids, the Desperado, Priest, Apache, and Outlaw, appear, each standing on a separate tall building. Their silhouettes bring fear into the hearts of everyone, changing the entire mood of the summit. The ocean of people begin to part, and we see Anarchy 12 sporting a cowboy hat passing through them, escorted by another peacekeeper. The massively buff android known as the Bartender towers over him and everyone else. No one would be able to reach Anarchy before being instantly broken into pieces. Anarchy walks out before Tempest's podium and looks him in the eye. This was the first time they have met this cycle, and only Tempest has recollection of their brief alliance in the past. He could barely recognize Anarchy nowadays. His suit, his technology was so advanced now. What could Anarchy be doing here? With the flick of a wrist, a platform made of hard green light appears to manifest, courtesy of his suit. He and the Bartender walk up it as he faces the people and begins to speak. Haveners, this summit is proof of everything I've been saying. The universe has given us the tools needed to become self-sufficient and unreliant of these so-called heroes that seek to keep the population under control and in check. Anarchy points his finger at Haven's strongest GOKEN. Chaos molds those who survive it into beasts capable of protecting themselves no matter what happens. So for those of you who want to be heroes, spending your entire existence protecting sheep and stunting evolution, then stay with Tempest and his strongest flock. But if you want to be able to stand on your own 2 feet and teach your families to do the same, you should follow the Alpha. Everyone looks at each other, and we slowly begin to see G-types trickle out of the masses and form around Anarchy's platform. Tempest begins to sense strange emotions coming from his own group. Karma Kane is completely overcome with lust and is infatuated with Anarchy 12. She never knew there was so much logic behind his madness, and though controversial, hearing it from his own mouth resonated within her outlook on life and moved her heart. She steps forward and shamelessly walks toward him, disbanding Haven's strongest GOKEN. Timbrus Gray tries his hardest to hold in a laugh and a bad joke. He whispers to R-Type X, I guess she comes around and goes around quite often. R-Type doesn't laugh, but he too steps away from the gate's platform and begins walking toward Anarchy's side. The crowd gasps, and some even begin to bawl their eyes out as the GOKEN begins to break and fall apart before their eyes. Tempest watches as Kid R-Type disbands, speechless. R-Type X stops and turns to look at Ebony. Ebony looks at her team, then at R-Type. She vowed to herself that she would go where the dragon went, and is also convinced by Anarchy's logic, but more so R-Type's perspective of said logic. Ebony walks forward and joins R-Type X. Tempest shakes his head. The light of hope he saw in her begins to dim and the future begins to look bleak. The corruption of the ugly city seems to begin taking its toll. R-Type looks at Tempest, who looks at him in disappointment. Not an R-Type, but himself. Tempest knew if R-Type entered the equation, he would be a major factor, but ignored R-Type's ambiguity and mysteriousness on the matter. Karma Kane, R-Type X, and Ebony leave the gate's platform and side with Anarchy 12. As they approach, they begin to witness the splendor of Anarchy's suit and in awe of the alien design. His body was like that of a pure black crystal in which the darkness of the galaxy sat. Patches of stars all throughout the chiseled anatomy of it, supported by a bright green alien alloy framing his arms and lower back. He was a beautiful god, Karma thought. Ebony never thought she'd be face to face with the darkness her father described. She flashes back to Eden Hargrave telling her that if she's not careful, she'll be left dangling over the city, tied to a spire like Myra Dare. Ebony looks at R-Type, who appears confident in where his allegiances lie. She's inspired by this, and perhaps it is how he has gotten so powerful, she thinks. Anarchy dribbles his eye across each of them. You understand? This planet will destroy us all unless we can survive. Saving them is ultimately killing them. R-Type walks toward the edge of the platform and looks at all the people, the news cameras, the big holoscreens displaying a live feed of them ruining the summit. He turns and adds that your true strength is often found during struggle. Anarchy agrees. He adds that it forfeits the G-Type's chances of becoming a better version of themselves, quoting the instigator's research. Suddenly, stepping through the veil of the void realm and appearing before their eyes, Ivan Bakara rises into an upright posture with his ghastly bearded grimace and adds his 2 cents.
It's all nature. Here today, gone tomorrow. The strong will stay, but the death will follow, yada yada.
R-Type stands on guard around this stranger who appears to also be in allegiance with Anarchy. In return for Ivan Bakara's support, Anarchy 12 has severed the black market from public access and now only provides the resources of that network to those within Ivan's criminal network. A network so deep that many goons don't even know they are part of it. Anarchy tells them, the Gate Center is not a symbol of hope, but a symbol of de-evolution, a mere cancer within the loops of these cycles. One that must be removed. R-Type steps in and reminds Anarchy 12 of their agreement, an agreement that Tempest would be spared. Anarchy acknowledges his concern and gives Ivan the signal. Ivan smiles, and with all the cameras on him, he snaps his fingers. Suddenly, several black convertible Cadillacs come speeding across their respective planned street routes. Driven by a deranged man, we see the caddy swerving wildly as it heads straight toward the Gate Summit crowd. Standing up in the back seat of it, we see the 17-year-old Psycho Aurelio of the Aurelio family with twin Uzis and a psychotic grin on her face. Her grandfather in the passenger seat begins cheering like a maniac as his black market cane begins to morph into a rifle as well. Tempest pulls out his phone and attempts to call for standby reinforcements when suddenly he feels the tremendous strength from a hand reaching from out of the void. Tempest is taken off guard as Selena Rend appears from the void and crushes Tempest's hand along with the cell phone inside of it, nearly breaking it. Selena squeezes it, bringing Tempest to his knees. Bend the bones for your new queen. Dozens and dozens of organized criminals appear walking out of the void realm, all wearing enchanted amulets of protection while carrying advanced outlawed black market weaponry, and begin firing at the Gate Center and the people to destroy it. Neville Threndorn activates the prototype bubble turrets, and they begin firing protective bubbles over the people in the building, completely bringing the killing of civilians to a stop. Tempest pushes himself into Selena and judo flips her over his shoulder, but with her supernatural reflexes, she lands on her feet and instead hurls Tempest into a glass fixture. But Neville Frendorn blasts a force field bubble around Tempest, breaking his fall. Selena then holds up one of her bangles that releases a wave of disrupting magic that causes the turrets to malfunction and cease firing. Timbers Gray appears behind Selena Wren and stabs her in the back with a long ninja knife he stole from Ivan and begins to push her away and off of the podium. Selena grabs and holds on, bringing Timbers with her as they tumble off of the platform and fall right into the void, then soon reappearing high in the sky, free-falling. "I'll swallow your soul, you rat!" Selena shouts at the attacker until she realizes she can't even see him anymore, but can feel his grip on her from him repeatedly stabbing her in the stomach. Selena activates her blessed earring of vision, revealing Timbers' presence. Selena grabs onto Timbers using her monstrous abyssal strength and manages to flip him toward the bottom so that he breaks the fall, killing him dead. But just as they crash to the ground, time comes to a slow crawl as Tempest drains time from the summoned criminals and puts it into Timbers Gray, who uses it to roll out of the way. Time reverts to normal and Selena smashes into the ground. She pulls herself back up to her feet and screams in frustration. She looks around and can't see Timbers when suddenly Timbers comes across the side of her head with a temple-busting knee, sending her to the ground. Pow! The impact explodes with raw, magical force as we see Timbers wearing not only her magical rings that he stole from her, but also her earring of vision. Tempest turns and sees Psycho Aurelio hanging out of the vehicle, spraying at the remainder of the unprotected citizens, when suddenly the driver makes a sharp turn and hops onto a collision course with the gate center's entrance. Psycho reaches down into the depths of the back seat and retrieves some black market explosives. Rooster C4. Psycho laughs maniacally as she begins to rig the Cadillac with the C4 explosives. Tempest attempts to stop the vehicle when suddenly a rocket comes flying into his proximity and causes a massive explosion, sending Tempest flying off of his feet and sliding across the ground. Psycho and her relatives dive out of the kamikaze Cadillac as it crashes into the entrances and explodes, causing the entire entrance of the gate center to crumble. Anarchy 12 walks over and picks up a dazed Tempest off of the ground with one arm, shows him a live feed of what's being broadcasted on TV globally. Tempest sees the gate center in shambles as the families living within it begin to flee, hide, and evacuate. We see Judge Benedict slicing down Ivan's gangsters, but while trying to protect the weak, he is sniped by several shooters, being able to slice down one bullet, but the other bullets penetrate and ravage his body immediately, forcing him to transform into his demonic form, the Demon Hound. The Demon Hound leaps out at all of the hostiles, but is immediately taken out by the bartender, who begins laying into him with massive blows that shatter the Demon Hound's bones, turning its insides into jello. The bartender suplexes the Demon Hound onto its stomach, then chokes and pulls his snout open, ripping his jaw from his face, then pulls its face apart for the kill. Judge Benedict's lifeless and headless body reverts back to its human form. We cut to Timbers Gray, dipping and dodging around Selena Wren's sharp claws. Chunks of her fleshy disguise dangle from her tattered face, revealing her true, terrifying abyssal self, as Timbers tears away at it with the knife. Timbers Gray doesn't entirely know what he's fighting, but he damn sure as hell wasn't gonna let it. Wham! Timbers is suddenly clobbered over the head by Psycho Aurelio, forcing him to trip and fall disoriented. Psycho begins walking up to Timbers slowly as she begins to manipulate and cause his senses to go haywire, the attack he just suffered feeling even more deadly than it should have been. Timbers turns invisible so no one can see him as he lies vulnerable on the ground. From his vision, the entire world is spinning and he tries to hold on to the ground to avoid falling into the sky. Psycho holds him inside of the deadly trance of vertigo, until soon Timbers isn't capable of concentrating and becomes visible again. Selena Wren walks over to him, lifts him up by his hood, and with a large gaping chomp, bites down and rips off Timbers Gray's head and swallows it whole. She then grabs the rest of his body with both arms and, like an anaconda, swallows and chews up the remainder of his body and spits out his shoe. Her grotesque, abyssal body sags to one side from the entire corpse inside of her stomach. But she soon snaps back into shape as she digests him into the void. Neville Threndord runs inside of the gate center to protect the remaining families caught in the crossfire with his massive bubble force field. Selena Rend and Psycho circle the bubble containing the remainder of the G-types and civilians. Psycho focuses her sense manipulation onto Neville the same way she did Timbers Gray, making Neville nauseated and forcing him to lose concentration, in turn making his force field weak. She begins firing her Uzis at her portion of the force field, making it easier to chisel through. Meanwhile, Selena Rend fades into the void, then reappears on the inside of the bubble, but is then trapped inside of another bubble summoned by Neville, to which she steps out of that one as well. Neville Threndord is doing everything he can to keep the two killer women at bay as long as he can. Tempest watches it all unfold as Anarchy broadcasts it all over for everyone to see. Psycho Aurelio blasts through Neville's force field as Selena Rend leaps through and with her sharp hands chops into his neck and grabs his throat and yanks it out. Neville falls to his knees within a puddle of his own blood, choking, and before death, witnesses Psycho Aurelio unload her twin Uzis on all of the remaining survivals in the gate center, killing every last person. Selena steps on Neville's back hard, sending him to the ground. Die! And then stomps and crushes his head. Tempest's eyes read defeat. He realizes he was experiencing an outcome entirely unlike any in the cycles before. He blames himself for all of it. Tampering with time resulted in even more pain and suffering. Anarchy continues to hold Tempest up by his neck, his broken legs dangling from the explosion. Suddenly, Tempest musters up the strength to absorb time from Anarchy in order to slow time, and manages to wiggle out of Anarchy's grip and drops to the floor. With only one hand, Tempest begins to generate a temporal anomaly so that he may leave a message to his future self in the next cycle. He warns future Tempest of R-Type X and Anarchy's ambush, when suddenly Ivan Bakara appears in front of Tempest and backhands him with the hardened ninja gauntlet, sending Tempest's hat flying. Ivan looks serious as he walks up to Tempest laid out on his back. Tempest is confused as to how this stranger is able to move freely through frozen time. Ivan is of the void, where time doesn't exist, and with 1 foot in and 1 foot out, he is unaffected. He twirls a kunai between his fingers and throws it into Tempest's knee, causing immense pain, breaking his concentration, thus reverting time back to normal. Anarchy stands over Tempest and tells him that Haven City is his city. Ivan pulls the knife out and goes to plunge it into Tempest's throat for the kill, when suddenly Ivan's arm is caught by R-Type X. Ivan sees the deep blue depths of energy raging in R-Type's eyes and tries to pull his wrist away, but R-Type keeps a firm grip. He looks at both Anarchy and Ivan and demands that Gordon Gale stays alive. Ivan fades into the void and reappears beside Anarchy 12, freeing himself of R-Type's clutches. Anarchy 12 honors the deal and gives the signal for an army of wanderers and dropships to come and collect any remaining G-types inside of the gate's compounds, labs, and experimental chambers. Ivan calls in his people, and just as they did Funoichi Inc., they collect and strip every inch of technology, research, and data from the Gate Center's facility. Even Gate's scientists and children who were hiding are rounded up and taken away in black vans. Ivan whistles, and we see Psycho Aurelio get giddy and filled with glee as she finally gets to press the button. "Get on with it," Selena screams. Psycho presses the button, and the entirety of the Gate Center is obliterated and removed from the face of the planet, leaving a crater in the center of Haven. Anarchy looks at Ivan, and Ivan nods before taking his leave and fading away into the void. Tempest lay on his back, one eye open towards the bright flames of ruins. All is lost. Tempest is ready to die and move onto another cycle. Little does he know that there will be no more cycles. Tempest closes his eyes and accepts his fate. Suddenly, a pillar of bright light and feathers touched down from what seemed like the heavens. A sudden flash and several slashes of a bladed weapon leaves deep gashes across Anarchy's chest and destroys his helmet and nearly decapitates R-Type, but he manages to roll out of the way of the instant flurry of slashes. Before they could lay eyes on what it was, another bright light explodes with blinding and disorienting light as a powerful gale of wind pushes them all back. Tempest has vanished before their very eyes. Once the coast is clear and the light has subsided, Anarchy walks up to where Tempest was and picks up a large brown feather. He requests surveillance from all of his all-seeing Gorgons, but all they caught was bright light swooping in and then flying away to the east. Anarchy looks up into the sky. We see Tempest laying in a comfortable bed, his legs wrapped up, while feathered shamans can be seen chanting over top of them. Tempest awakens slowly, and by his bedside, he sees several tall and strong Nibunese women bearing large, powerful wings on their backs. One sees he is awakened and walks over to him and crouches to eye level. She introduces herself as Valkyria of the Winged Valkyries. She then informs Tempest he is safe and in Nibu. Tempest shouts and asks if his daughter Amelia is safe. Valkyria places her fingers over his lips and tells him to lower his voice. She then points over to a sleeping Amelia. Valkyria then orders for the shaman to work his magic. Tempest tries to get up but is splashed with a wet substance by the shaman that immediately puts him in a sleepy and calm state. Tempest falls back into bed, knocked out cold.